June 15, 2025. A small, almost unnoticeable headline appeared in a local newspaper in Ouagadougou, the capital of Burkina Faso. 11 religious leaders demand President Ibrahim Traoré to step down and call for early elections. No one anticipated what came next. Within hours, that quiet headline exploded into a digital wildfire. African social media platforms ignited. The hashtag #StepDownTraore clashed ferociously with Stand With Traore. A war had begun, not with guns and bombs, but with narratives, loyalties, and truth. President Ibrahim Traoré, the same leader, once hailed as the defiant symbol of anti-imperial resistance in West Africa, was now being labeled by religious figures as a dictator, immoral, illegitimate. And the cruelest irony, those demanding his resignation were not foreign agents or opposition politicians, but respected religious leaders, men once seen as the moral compass of the nation, now accusing him of selfishness and tyranny. But who are they really, and why now? When those who once preached forgiveness demand a president's head over budget cuts, when pastors and preachers whisper in corridors with Western-funded think tanks, then this is no longer a domestic dispute. This is a fault line ready to fracture all of Africa. In today's video, I'm not just telling you a story. I'm going to expose a covert operation systematically crafted to dismantle a leader they can't control. And I want you, whether you're watching from Ghana, Nigeria, Vietnam, or France, to ask yourself one question: who really fights for the people? If you stand for truth, if you believe Africa deserves to control its own destiny, subscribe now, turn on notifications, and share this video. Because if we stay silent, this kind of war will one day knock on your country's door. Who are they, men who once preached forgiveness, compassion, and humility, now waving the banner of political upheaval? 11 religious leaders, ranging from major churches to influential Islamic councils, united under a single declaration addressed to the presidential palace of Burkina Faso. The message crystal clear: President Ibrahim Traoré must resign. A democratic election must be held immediately. But the danger lies not in their demand, it lies in their reasoning. They accuse Ibrahim Traoré of ignoring religious organizations, withholding financial support, and disrespecting the spiritual role of faith institutions in society. Some even go as far as saying the president governs for personal gain, not for the people. What makes these accusations dangerous is not just their content, but how they are disguised as moral outrage when in reality they are rooted in self-interest. One pastor who recently appeared on national television urging citizens to pray for more democratic governance was caught in a leaked audio saying, "The president cut 60% of our church's community funding." That's an insult. When faith institutions begin demanding larger budgets as the price for their political blessings, it's no longer about the gospel, it's about bargaining with sacred influence. This is no longer about belief, it's about manipulating belief as a weapon against national authority. But do they really speak for the people? Across Burkina Faso's social media platforms, hundreds of thousands have responded, "We didn't elect the church to run our politics." Traoré may not be perfect, but he's not a puppet of the West. Those shouting about democracy were silent when the country was bleeding. Perhaps it's time to ask a bitter question. When religion loses its independence, is it still faith, or has it become a pawn of hidden powers? While the storm raged through pulpits, mosques, and veiled speeches, dressed in religious robes, President Ibrahim Traoré remained strikingly calm. No angry tweets, no press conferences filled with outrage. Instead, he issued a simple message, one that sent shockwaves through Burkina Faso: "I will not step down. If the country is stable and terrorism is defeated, we will hold general elections in 2026. And when that time comes, I will be ready to leave office." Just one sentence, yet it struck like a bullet through the heart of public discourse. On one hand, he acknowledged the value of democratic elections. On the other, he emphasized a brutal truth. In a nation surrounded by chaos and violence, elections aren't a priority, They are a deadly trap. A solid argument. Traore isn't rejecting democracy, he's protecting it. President Traore argued that holding elections under current conditions, where many areas remain under the control of terrorist groups and entire villages live in daily fear, is not democracy. It's a bloodbath waiting to happen. His stance is more than strategy. It's a declaration: I want to be elected, but I won't let my people die for a ballot box. Numbers don't lie. Burkina Faso's transformation under Traore. He didn't just speak, he showed results. The president presented hard data, and the numbers told a powerful story. The national GDP rose from $17 billion to $26 billion in just over a year. Nationwide free education was implemented, covering both primary and secondary levels. Infrastructure growth exploded from 17 paved roads to over 5,000 newly built or under construction. Military and security reform: over 40% of previously terrorist-occupied zones were reclaimed. These aren't minor achievements, especially for a country left in the cold by Western powers and fighting daily for its survival. Traore, a president who speaks less and does more. Unlike traditional politicians who promise the sky, Traore has earned a reputation as the silent worker. He rarely speaks to the media, but when he does, his words are sharp, deliberate, and unwavering. I was not elected by a ballot, but I lead as if every uncast vote were a responsibility on my shoulders. This paradox has given him a strange magnetism. While Western media labels him the young autocrat, African social networks have dubbed him something entirely different: the people's captain. A symbolic counterstrike, silence from a man who knows his enemy. His response to the religious leaders wasn't fire and fury. It was cold precision. He didn't accuse them of betrayal. He didn't call them puppets. He simply said, I won't argue with men in robes, but if they wish to be politicians, let them stand in the light and be held accountable by the people. A short statement, but a deep challenge. Choose your lane, guide the soul, or chase power. Don't play both sides. President Ibrahim Traoré isn't fighting with microphones. He's fighting with facts, numbers, and deliberate silence. In a world where those who shout the loudest often do the least, perhaps that's exactly what makes him so dangerous to the hands trying to control Burkina Faso from afar. When religious leaders in Burkina Faso stood up and demanded President Ibrahim Traoré's resignation, a single question echoed across the country. Why now? Traoré is not a corrupt elder clinging to power. He has no personal scandals. In fact, his presidency has been marked by reform, free education, economic revival, territorial security. So why now? Why this urgent push to remove him? And why, from the clergy clues, from international religious conferences? Recent independent investigations have revealed a striking pattern. At least 3 of the 11 religious leaders who signed the petition to unseat President Traoré had attended international religious summits, sponsored by NGOs based in Paris and Geneva. At these events, the focus wasn't just theology, it was political strategy, enhancing religious influence in national governance, promoting European-style democracy in West Africa, training clergy on media engagement to shape political discourse. At first glance, this might seem innocent. But when those same leaders trained abroad return home and simultaneously initiate a campaign to remove a populist president, it begins to look less like divine calling and more like coordinated influence. Behind that coordination, a familiar formula used across Africa. The Western blueprint for soft regime change. From Nigeria to Côte d'Ivoire, Mali to Libya, Western powers have evolved. Gone are the days of direct military interventions. Now they prefer a refined formula. Identify a cultural or spiritual vulnerability, religion, tribe, community. Fund NGOs, conferences, scholarships, and aid packages. Influence community leaders toward Western democracy. Trigger political unrest through local voices when needed. In Burkina Faso, religion was the soft spot. People trust their pastors and imams. They see them as moral authorities. That's the very door Western forces have walked through. The ultimate goal: topple a leader who won't obey. Ibrahim Traoré is among the rare 21st-century African presidents who openly defy Western control. He terminated military agreements with France, shut down several foreign intelligence outposts, redirected foreign policy towards self-reliance, and built new ties with Russia and the global South. That made him a thorn in the side of those who once treated West Africa like a colonial backyard. So now using religion as a pressure tool isn't about morality, it's a calculated move. Lessons from history. When your own people turn against you. Africa's past is littered with similar betrayals. Patrice Lumumba was executed after local leaders manipulated by foreign interests turned against him. Thomas Sankara, Burkina Faso's own revolutionary hero, was assassinated in a coup led by a former ally. Muammar Gaddafi, once hailed as Africa's liberator, was overthrown after a media and military blitz, aided by domestic dissent, fueled by spiritual figures. The pattern: every unyielding independent African leader is eventually attacked using familiar tools but fresh faces. Are we watching a new Sankara being targeted? This time by men in robes. What's happening in Burkina Faso may not just be a political crisis. It may be a rerun of an old colonial script wrapped in a new costume. No tanks, just sermons. No military coups, just mass confusion. No political opposition, just holy voices, seeded by international funding. If we fail to see this clearly, Africa will once again be torn apart not by weapons, but by whispers in the name of God. While political petitions and religious sermons play out in public squares, the real battlefield is online on screens, in hashtags, in comment sections. This is where the war for public opinion rages, and where the fate of President Ibrahim Traoré may ultimately be decided. Because in the 21st century, a leader doesn't just fight rebels or terrorists, he fights narratives carefully crafted and algorithmically amplified. Western media versus African reality. As religious leaders called for Traoré's resignation, Western media reacted with stunning coordination. Burkina Faso's strongman faces, clerical revolt. France. 24 Democracy demands, new leadership in Burkina Faso. The Guardian churches join the people in demanding change. Deutsche Welle. The headlines all carried the same tone, a heroic portrayal of religious leaders and a villainous framing of Traoré. But on the ground, the narrative is far more complex. Local journalists, independent bloggers, and social media influencers in Burkina Faso and across Africa began pushing back. These priests aren't speaking for us. Traoré's hands are clean, he's just not in the West's pocket. Beware the colonial script wrapped in a Bible. This counter-narrative isn't backed by billion-dollar media empires, but by real people with lived experience who see through the manipulation. Platforms like Facebook, TikTok, and WhatsApp have become the modern battlegrounds of African politics. Every speech, every decision, every protest is now live-streamed, clipped, and debated in real time. Traoré's supporters, largely youth and civil society movements, have taken to social media to mount a defense campaign, highlighting his achievements in education and infrastructure, exposing inconsistencies in the religious leader's past statements, connecting dots between foreign-sponsored conferences and sudden political activism. Hashtags like Soccer Africa for Africans and We Stand with Traoré have trended across Francophone Africa. Yet the challenge remains: while local narratives gain traction, they're often drowned out by the louder, more credible-sounding voice of Western institutions. It's David versus Goliath, except this time the slingshot is Wi-Fi, and truth struggles to go viral. As the media storm grew, so did the distortion. Fake headlines were spread through screenshots. Clerical speeches were edited out of context. Alleged testimonies of disillusioned citizens, many traced to fake accounts, spread like wildfire. This is not new. It's the same tactic used in the lead-up to the fall of leaders in Libya, Sudan, and even South America. It's called manufactured consent. The idea is simple: if you bombard the public with enough half-truths and emotional appeals, Eventually, they'll believe the lie was their own idea. Despite the media attacks, a surprising wave of resilience has emerged. In marketplaces, radio call-in shows, and student campuses, people are not echoing the media, they're questioning it. Why is the West so eager for this man to leave? Why do these pastors want elections when there are still bombs in the north? If he's a dictator, why are the roads being built, schools opening, and prices dropping? This skepticism marks a generational shift. Today's African youth, digitally connected, historically aware, no longer accept foreign narratives as gospel. They've seen too many Gaddafis fall, too many Sankaras betrayed, too many false prophets preach freedom only to sell sovereignty. While many leaders rush to counter propaganda, Traore remains unusually quiet online. His digital silence is not weakness, it's tactical. Every time his opponents rant, he answers with a school inauguration. Every time a headline attacks him, he opens a new health clinic. Every time he's called undemocratic, he builds another road. He lets action speak louder than tweets, and increasingly people are listening. The real issue isn't whether Ibrahim Traoré is flawless. The real issue is what kind of leadership Africa is allowed to have. Can an African leader stand against Western pressure without being labeled a tyrant? Can a government delay elections for national security without being condemned? Can people choose sovereignty over imported democracy and still be respected? This media war isn't just about Burkina Faso. It's about Africa's right to think for itself. And right now, that right is under siege, not by soldiers, but by stories. What's happening in Burkina Faso is not just a crisis. It's not even just a power struggle. It's a defining test for all of Africa. When a president like Ibrahim Traoré rises not because the West crowned him, but because his people did, he becomes a threat. Not because of weapons, not because of ideology, but because of one dangerous truth: he's not controllable. And so the machine activates. Religious leaders suddenly demand democracy. Foreign media crafts the villain. Whispers become headlines. Soft pressure becomes internal rebellion. But here's the twist they didn't see coming. The people are not buying it. Across Burkina Faso and beyond, Africans are waking up. They're seeing through the scripts. They're asking deeper questions. They're choosing sovereignty over slogans. Traoré's future is uncertain. He may fall. He may rise stronger. But what matters more is what this moment reveals. A continent learning to read between the lines. A generation no longer afraid to challenge the narrative. A movement that believes leadership should be local, not approved by Paris or Washington. If you've watched this far, ask yourself, do we want leaders chosen by ballots or by foreign think tanks? Do we want elections run in peace or chaos? Do we want African freedom or just freedom branded from abroad? This channel exists to tell the other side of the story, the one you won't see on BBC or CNN. So if you believe in truth, if you believe in Africa, if you believe in the power of people over puppets, subscribe, share, and stand up. Because the real fight is not just in Burkina Faso, it's in every African mind, heart, and headline. In our next video, we'll go deeper. How religious conferences in Europe are quietly shaping African elections and who's funding them. Until then, stay aware, stay informed, and most of all, stay free. A lesson of sovereignty, truth, and the new African consciousness. Based on the story of President Ibrahim Traoré and the religious revolt in Burkina Faso. In the heart of West Africa, a quiet newspaper headline erupted into a digital wildfire. It wasn't about war, famine, or natural disaster. It was a call veiled in religious language for a president to step down. But beneath this spiritual cloak was a deeper, more dangerous game, a covert attempt to destabilize a rising African leader through psychological warfare disguised as moral outrage. The lesson here is not just political, it's existential. It's about Africa's right to self-determination in an era where empires no longer arrive with ships and cannons, but with sermons, scholarships, and social media campaigns. President Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso represents a different archetype of African leadership. He is young, pragmatic, and unyielding to foreign control. He does not rant on international podiums nor beg for Western aid. Instead, he paves roads, opens schools, and reclaims territories. While Western media calls him a strongman, the people call him the people's captain. This contradiction reveals the first vital lesson: the narrative war is now more powerful than the battlefield. The real war in Africa is not always fought with guns, it's fought with headlines, hashtags, and half-truths. When 11 religious leaders suddenly emerge to accuse a president of dictatorship without public consensus or popular backing, it signals something far more organized and far less organic. The roots of this maneuver are not new. Africa has seen this playbook before. In Congo, Patrice Lumumba was assassinated not because he was weak, but because he was fiercely independent. In Libya, Gaddafi was eliminated not because his people begged for democracy, but because he challenged the global monetary system. In Burkina Faso itself, Thomas Sankara was betrayed by those closest to him, not because he was brutal, but because he believed Africa could feed itself, arm itself, and define itself. Traoré, it seems, walks in that lineage, and that is precisely what makes him dangerous, not to his people, but to the global order that prefers African leaders who are obedient, predictable, and beholden. But there's another lesson here. When religion becomes a political weapon, the soul of a nation is at risk. The 11 religious leaders didn't merely question Traoré's governance. They questioned his legitimacy, using language once reserved for colonial betrayal. They accused him of ignoring the spiritual backbone of the country. But investigations show that at least 3 of them had attended foreign-funded religious summits in Europe, where the true agenda wasn't theological, but strategic. The Western playbook has evolved from colonizing land to colonizing thought. They no longer need to install military bases. They now install doubts, suspicions, and moral confusion. And they use the most trusted voices in society, priests, imams, community elders, to do it. In the short term, it causes chaos, but in the long term, it erodes the very fabric of national sovereignty. Traoré responded not with fury, but with poise. If they wish to be politicians, he said, let them stand in the light and be held accountable by the people. That single sentence draws the line between faith and politics, between divine service and strategic betrayal, between guiding the soul and guiding foreign interests. This teaches us another essential lesson. True leadership isn't just about power, it's about restraint. In an age of sensationalism, Traoré's silence is revolutionary. He doesn't flood the media with rebuttals. He doesn't label his critics as traitors. He lets his actions speak. New roads, new schools, new economic policies. He governs as if every child educated, every road built, and every terrorist defeated is his vote. This is what makes him more dangerous to neo-colonial forces than any rebel. He is competent. Competence in African governance is feared more than chaos because it breeds legitimacy. And legitimacy cannot be bought, sponsored, or manipulated. But this story also teaches us about the resilience of the African public. Despite coordinated media attacks, headlines from France 24, The Guardian, Deutsche Welle, millions of Africans on the ground refuse to accept the narrative. They ask the right questions. If Traoré is a dictator, why are the schools full? If he's immoral, why are healthcare centers expanding? If he's illegitimate, why does the youth rise to defend him? This shift signals a generational awakening. Young Africans born in the digital age are not easily swayed by BBC documentaries or human rights reports from Geneva. They understand that freedom branded from abroad is still a form of control. They understand that democracy cannot be imported. It must be built contextually and independently. And that brings us to one of the most critical lessons: Africa must define its own future, even if that definition challenges Western expectations. Democracy is not a one-size-fits-all model. Elections held in the midst of terrorist violence are not democratic, they are suicidal. A country must be stable before it can be truly democratic. That is not tyranny, that is wisdom. Traoré's position that elections will be held once security is guaranteed is not a rejection of democracy, it is a defense of its integrity. This story also reminds us that foreign pressure always dresses itself as internal demand. From the religious leader's letter to the amplified media coverage, it all appears domestic. But the fingerprints point elsewhere. Foreign NGOs, European think tanks, and media conglomerates with long histories of meddling in African affairs. What is happening in Burkina Faso is not isolated. It is a chapter in the broader struggle for African sovereignty, a struggle waged in boardrooms, not battlefields. In the end, perhaps the most profound lesson is this: Africa doesn't need perfect leaders. It needs courageous ones, leaders who build before they speak, leaders who resist pressure before they seek praise, leaders who don't beg for validation from Paris or Washington. Traoré may not be perfect, but he stands. And sometimes that is the most radical thing a leader can do, stand when everything is designed to make him fall. The youth are watching, the streets are whispering, the continent is waking up. And one man's defiance, silent, steady, and stubborn, may be the spark that lights 1,000 other flames. Because the battle for Africa's future will not be won in summits or secret meetings. It will be won in the hearts of its people, one truth at a time. And the truth, no matter how buried, always finds its voice. An African citizen's reflection on sovereignty manipulation and the silent revolution unfolding before our eyes. I was born in a small West African town where elders still speak in proverbs and children grow up hearing tales of Sankara Lumumba and Nkrumah. We were told they died because they loved Africa too much, because they refused to bow. I never fully understood what that meant until now. The recent events in Burkina Faso, with President Ibrahim Traoré standing at the center of a storm orchestrated by religious elites, foreign media, and suspicious civil society voices, struck a chord deeper than I expected. It didn't feel like just another news cycle. It felt personal. It felt familiar. It felt like a page torn from Africa's old playbook of betrayal. But this time something is different. As an African, I see through the headlines. I recognize the hypocrisy when Western media, who were silent during our years of suffering, suddenly become champions of democracy and human rights, the moment one of our own refuses to obey their script. It always begins the same. They call him a dictator. They find local voices to echo their concerns, and they create a story so emotionally charged that it distracts from the real question: who benefits from his downfall? When 11 religious leaders demand President Traoré's resignation, I ask not just why now, but who told them to speak. Because I remember when the churches were silent as our schools collapsed. I remember when the mosques prayed for peace, while foreign troops turned our soil into war zones. And I remember no press conference, no pastoral letter, no public outrage when our minerals were being plundered by outsiders. So why now? Let's speak plainly. What's happening in Burkina Faso is not about God. It's about gold. It's not about democracy. It's about disruption. And it's not about elections. It's about obedience. President Traoré may not have been elected through the ballot box, but he governs with more legitimacy than most. Why? Because legitimacy doesn't come from paperwork. It comes from the people. It comes from results. It comes from trust. And for the first time in a long time, we see a man in power who doesn't treat us as spectators, but as stakeholders. He doesn't spend hours on television giving flowery speeches. He builds roads. He reclaims territories. He challenges foreign contracts. He tells us the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. And that, I believe, is why they want him gone. We Africans have seen this movie before. We saw it when Gaddafi tried to unify Africa under a single currency backed by gold. They said he was mad. They said he was dangerous. Then they bombed him and left Libya in ruins. We saw it when Thomas Sankara told us to walk tall without foreign aid. They said he was too radical. Then they killed him and blamed it on internal politics. And now we see it again. Same camera, different actor, same script. But what they don't realize is this: Africa is no longer asleep. Thanks to social media, we talk to each other. Thanks to history, we recognize the patterns. Thanks to men like Traore, we understand the cost of silence. Yes, there are challenges. Terrorists still threaten our borders. Corruption still lives in the shadows. But for the first time, many of us feel like our suffering has a purpose. Like there is a leader who bleeds with us, not just for us. And when he says elections will happen after peace is secured, we don't hear tyranny, we hear common sense. Because how can a mother walk to the voting booth when the road is mined? How can a father vote when the polling station is under threat? We want democracy, but we want it alive, not buried under rubble. As an African, I'm also tired of being told what democracy looks like. In Europe, they have centuries of peace and institutions. In Africa, we are still rebuilding from the trauma of colonization. We are still fighting for food safety and dignity, and yet we are expected to operate as if our reality is the same as theirs. Let me ask, would France hold elections if 40% of its territory were under terrorist control? Would the UK rush to vote while bombs fall on its schools? Then why is it considered anti-democratic when we choose to secure lives before ballots? This isn't just hypocrisy, it's warfare disguised as advice. And the most painful part, they use our own people to do it. Religious leaders, media personalities, NGO representatives trained abroad. They come back speaking the language of freedom, but pushing the agenda of control. It's not just betrayal, it's colonization with African faces. But here's where the story turns. Burkina Faso's youth are not buying the lie. Across TikTok, YouTube, and WhatsApp, we're speaking our truth. We're defending our sovereignty. We're questioning the headlines. We're sharing the real data, the schools, the GDP growth, the reclaimed territories. And we are watching how quickly the West moves, not to praise these wins, but to discredit the man behind them. Why? Because Traore's success is dangerous. Not just to France, not just to the IMF, but to every African leader still kneeling for foreign validation. If he succeeds, it proves we can govern ourselves. If he survives, it proves we don't need foreign aid to rise. And if he thrives, it means the colonial spell is broken. As an African citizen, I am not romanticizing him. Traore is not a saint. He is a soldier, a strategist, and a symbol. And like all symbols, he can be misused, misunderstood, or even destroyed. But symbols also awaken memory. And Traore reminds us of who we could be if we were truly free. So when I see pastors in expensive robes calling for transparency, I ask, where were you when our children died of hunger? When I see foreign media call him a strongman, I ask, who appointed you the moral compass of Africa? When I see religious declarations demanding his resignation, I ask, whose God are you serving? Because my God cares about truth. And the truth is, this Burkina Faso is healing. And that healing threatens the disease of neo-colonial control. This moment is bigger than one man. It's about reclaiming our voice. It's about rewriting the narrative. It's about recognizing that democracy cannot exist without dignity, and dignity begins with sovereignty. And so to the religious leaders who want to play politician, I say, step into the sun. Let the people judge you as they judge every man who seeks power. To the foreign media who twist our pain into propaganda, I say, you no longer own our story. To the youth of Africa who feel powerless, I say, you are the power. Your voice, your memory, your refusal to be fooled, this is the revolution. And to President Ibrahim Traoré, I say, do not speak louder, just keep building. Let the schools be your speeches. Let the roads be your reply. Let every clinic, every village restored, every terrorist defeated be your campaign. Because in the end, the people remember what was done, not what was said. Africa is rising not with fanfare, but with clarity. And this time, we will not be divided. Not by religion, not by media, not by the West. We are no longer asking for freedom. we are becoming it. And that is the lesson I carry from this story. Not as a spectator, but as a son of Africa. That he dared to hope for something better, and was willing to pay the price for that hope. It is the same hope that filled the streets of Accra when Kwame Nkrumah shouted, "Africa must unite." The same hope that Nelson Mandela whispered to his cellmates on Robben Island. The same hope we still carry in the dusty roads of Bamako, Khartoum, Harare. A hope that says we are not pawns, we are not collateral, we are not servants of empire. We are people sovereign, conscious, and worthy of writing our own history. Ibrahim didn't free Iran, but he showed the world what freedom looks like. And in doing so, he reminded Africa that the world does not only watch us fall. Sometimes it watches to see if we will rise. And if we do slowly, painfully, defiantly, then perhaps one day a child in Lagos or Luanda or Kigali will look up at a leader and say, "He didn't bend. So why should we?"